Hello and welcome to Season 2 of The Chaos of Scale, the podcast dedicated to helping scaling businesses navigate the human side of growth. I'm your host, Andy Golding, and today we're talking about raising the floor. We know that there's room for improvement and we want to do things better, faster, more efficiently, so we focus on shooting the lights out, raising the bar, raising the roof. But what if we actually just focused on raising the floor, taking small incremental steps to improve, instead of leaping and bounding and shooting for the stars when we're all actually a little bit tired of reaching for the stars all the time? As always, I promise to leave you with at least one thing to think differently about in how you work with others, and one actionable step to help you show up as a rad or even more rad human at work. You know the drill. Please like, subscribe, share, and for some extra kudos and gratitude, please consider leaving a review. Today we're talking about one of the biggest strategic misfires that I see in scaling organizations. Everyone's obsessed with raising the roof, when what we desperately actually need to do rather is raise the floor. And I first heard about this idea from the author Steve Magnus, who also co-hosts the podcast Excellence Actually, which I highly recommend to anybody trying to be more excellent in their way of being. When I first saw Steve's Instagram post about this, it immediately zinged in my brain. Steve says that when it comes to performance, our average days matter more than our best days. And I truly could not agree more. Realistically, we're going to have a lot more average days than great days. So often when my husband asks me, "How was work today?" I always try and find something descriptive and informative to use to describe my day. But very often, to be honest, my day was just fine. And that's okay, so long as we're erring towards a strong net positive, but I digress. Acknowledging that we will have a lot more average days than great ones is fine, but then what needs to be in place to make sure that even our average days deliver great value and impact? That's the key question here. What's the minimum viable process, structures, etc. that help make even average days impactful? Raising the roof is the classic move. Launch more, sell more, hire more, push harder, stretch the team to the next big target. But the real drag on growth isn't the ceiling, it's the floor. There's generally already a lot of space between us and the ceiling, but not so much space between us and the floor. And that's why I love this idea of raising the floor, because it means improving the baseline. Raising the floor means improving the minimum standard of quality, the consistency of execution, the reliability of decision making, the clarity of roles, the level of alignment that everybody is required to operate from. These basic things don't get a lot of airtime generally because they're not sexy, they're not fun, but they're the floor. And having these basics in place ensures that even on average days, we can deliver impact. And the floor is where most scaling businesses haven't ever focused. We've been growing, shipping, surviving, launching, selling, hiring, pushing. And this is where every business navigating the chaos of scale gets to a point where suddenly the processes don't support our goals. The structure and the ways of working are at odds with the size of the organization, and we somewhat feel like we're acting like a grown-up organization, but we don't really feel like a grown-up organization because you're suddenly an 80, 90, 100 person organization relying on the structure and processes of a 30 person organization to keep you moving forward. And these basics aren't working anymore as a consequence of growth, which is a luxury problem. Absolutely. You've grown. You've outgrown yourself. Congratulations. But now you have to raise the floor. You have to get these basics right to ensure that your foundational ways of working can support and sustain the continued growth of the organization. You've been so deep in the chaos of scale, busy raising the roof, pushing the boundaries, growing, scaling, And now you have to put in place the right processes, structures, tools, and systems to help keep raising the roof as you go. Raising the floor, it's the unsexy, unglamorous, critical work of building that baseline, that minimum viable place from which we need to operate and deliver. It's the invisible on the balance sheet glue that supports sustained growth. This is what gets us delivering consistently great, reliable products and services. People need tools and systems and processes and ways of working that support the promises that we're making to our market and our audience. Consistently raising the floor, reinforcing the foundation, compounds effort and results. Reaching, pushing, stretching for the roof without proper processes and support in place is asking for combustion. And this is exactly where we start to see these cracks coming in to scaling organizations, because we're reaching and stretching for the roof, but there's nothing underneath us supporting us. And so we start to make promises that we can't deliver on. We start to ship not necessarily the best version of our products. We start to make some bad decisions internally, mistakes creep in. Totally normal chaos of scale stuff. But this is exactly where we need to have a focus on raising the floor. And now, this is not to say that while we focus on getting the basics right, we don't still focus on all of the things that are going to keep growing the business, moving us forward, etc. No, we need to still do that, but we need to be doing this in the background as well. This needs to also get C-suite level attention and MT buy-in and leadership non-negotiability around getting these basics right. So how do we go about raising the floor? Start by defining what is our level of minimum viable excellence? What is the worst acceptable version of our work? And where are some very real, if uncomfortable to look at, examples of the worst acceptable version of our work in action? This is the time to be real about what's really going on. Don't sugarcoat, don't hide from things. Just look at the reality as it is. Because when you can see some of the worst acceptable examples, you can see what needs to be raised up. You can see clearly where it is, how it's slowing you down, how it's getting in the way of growth, customer experience, etc. Another thing to do is look at your processes. Are your processes documented? Are they accessible? Are they real? Do you have actual repeatable playbooks that new hires can follow? Do your processes actually support the size of organization that you are? So often in scaling organizations, we start to see bottlenecks creeping in with few leaders. The leaders who have generally been there for a very long time hold a lot of institutional knowledge, and decision-making tends to funnel upwards towards them. They're busy, they're overstretched, and things really start to slow down. How can you change some of those processes? How can you create decision-making authority in other areas so you can kind of distribute it a bit more to get rid of those roadblocks that are creeping in? Another thing to look at is ownership. Do you have clear ownership of tasks and projects and goals? Who decides on these things? Coming back to that idea of who owns decision-making, who decides on things, who delivers things, who measures success, and what are the measures of success? And finally, when we start to look at how do we raise the floor, this last one is juicy, and I'm so here for it. Consistent performance expectations. No more of, this person gets away with it because they've been here since we were in the garage still, and this person gets away with it because they've been here since Series A. Legacy or not, minimum viable excellence applies to everyone. What is the level of minimum viable excellence that we require when we ship a product? What is the level of minimum viable excellence that our processes need to deliver? What is the level of minimum viable excellence that we will not tolerate anything less than? Raising the floor raises the average, and raising the average raises the whole organization. This is about getting the fundamentals right, because when the fundamentals are stable, teams will spend less time firefighting execution becomes more predictable, decision making becomes faster, strategy becomes clearer, cross-functional work flows more smoothly. Minimum viable excellence, that is the thing that we need to define. That is the floor. Where are we not reaching that? That's how we raise the floor to get there. Your action item from today. You may have a good idea of the inefficiencies that exist, but I guarantee you that the people working at the proverbial coalface have the best vantage points on this, and they can see the opportunities to raise the floor. So your action item, bring the team together and block at least 2 hours for this initial exercise. Trust me, it will be worth it. Explain the concept of raising the floor, identifying the small inefficiencies, the unnecessary steps in the process, the pointless parts of the process that don't suit the business we are anymore. Give them full context and then let them brainstorm in their teams. Let them have at it on what does raising the floor look like for us. What are the 3 to 5 things that we can raise the floor on? List them out. First list them out and then get them to go deep into what does raising the floor look like on each one? What needs to happen? What needs to change? What needs to be gotten rid of? What needs to be added in to get us to better, more efficient, smoother, minimum viable excellence? Ask your team, if we doubled the workload tomorrow, what would break first? What's the simplest process in this company that somehow still doesn't work? What is the bare minimum acceptable output, and how often do we fail to hit it? What are we doing today because we've always done it, not because it actually works? That's the legacy thing again, that in so many scaling organizations starts to trip us up and gets in the way of raising the floor. What are we doing today because we've always done it, not because it actually works? And lastly, ask your team, where does our organization rely on individual heroics instead of organizational capability? These answers are great ways to catalyze ideas and action items for how can we raise the floor. And also, this is the starting point. This exercise that you'll do with your team is really just the adrenaline shot to catalyze the thinking now. If you really want to raise the floor, you need to move into action. In his book, Atomic Habits, James Clear creates a brilliant distinction between motion and action. And this is relevant here because you want to be sure that you move into action on this and don't just wheel spin in motion. The way that James Clear breaks it down, motion is speaking to a personal trainer. Action is doing 10 squats. Motion is researching topics for the next book. Action is writing 10 sentences. And in raising the floor, motion is identifying where we need to raise the floor and the opportunities for better. Action is taking steps to make the change, to change the process, update the tool, implement the software. Often when we start the thinking process on improving things and raising the floor, we can mistake motion for action. So this workshop or thinking exercise that you'll run with your team, it's actually just motion. It's an adrenaline shot. It's going to create some great ideas, but nothing changes if nothing changes. And nothing changes now that you've identified the problem. It actually only changes when you take actions, start making changes, and fixing the problems. That's how you raise the floor. So be sure that you move to action. Don't just stay in motion, and keep raising the floor. Thank you for joining us today. If you found value in today's episode and you know someone who could benefit from some thinking on raising the floor, please consider sharing this. And while you're at it, please do the rad things like liking, subscribing, sharing, reviewing, etc., so that more people like you and I can get insight on navigating the chaos of scale. I'm Andy Golding, and although business growth is messy, the human side doesn't have to be. Until next time, keep raising the floor.